Some questions about products. What happened to bottled Kaweco ink and Banditapple notebooks? And do you ever plan to carry more Pelikan pens? Sure. So these pens, not the pens, but the ink and the notebooks and stuff, this falls into a category of products that we have that just frankly don't really sell that much for a variety of reasons. You know, sometimes for whatever reason, products don't sell. And you know, anyone who's in any retail business or you run your own business or whatever, you know, especially if it's a product-based business, man, inventory will bog you down. It will tie up all your cash. It will fill up all your shelves. You know, it'll fill up anytime you're trying to do any type of analysis about your products. It makes things complicated. You look at our website, we have 3,700 different products or so on our site. And, you know, if there's 1,000 extra products of things that really aren't popular or don't sell well, it's not really serving you as a customer very well to see a bunch of things that you know you're not going to want. Of course, it's always difficult because we don't know what everybody's going to want. For the most part, you know, we try to guess, but we don't really know how something's going to take off until we are actually selling it. So sometimes we'll launch things, you know, Kaweco ink was a good example, something that came out. We didn't know what demand there would be. It was kind of an expensive ink. And we carried it for a little bit, like nobody bought it or very few people bought it. There were just a lot of good alternatives that were much lower price and different bottle shape and stuff like that. Didn't really sell, so we discontinued it and stopped carrying it. So it just, frankly, it just wasn't really missed that much. So we stopped carrying it. Now, of course, there's always, you know, going to be the individual who's like, this is the one ink I've been looking for all my life and you stopped carrying it. And it's like, I'm really sorry, but you are the one person last year that bought that ink. I just can't keep carrying it. It just doesn't make sense for me to do that. It's not prudent for me as a business owner to do that. So we have to be somewhat diligent about that. Banditapple Notebooks specifically, so Banditapple is a very small retailer. They're out based in Asia, and they had made these. There's no US distributor for these notebooks, so we were in direct contact with them. We were carrying them for a while. They wanted to undergo a redesign, so they basically stopped making the previous version of their notebooks, and they told us, we're going to redesign them. It's going to take a year or two for that to happen. And we were like, okay. So the products that we had on our site were the old version. We didn't really know what the redesign was going to be, but we knew it was going to look different. So we couldn't really leave the products up on our site that we had for the next year or two because it wasn't even going to look the same. So, you know, and the popularity of Banditapple was so-so. You know, they were an alternative to Midori notebooks to put into the traveler's notebooks. And, you know, so basically they stopped the supply. We sold out the stock that we had, and we just decided we weren't going to leave it up on the site if it was going to be that long before, you know, it was going to come back. Because basically by the time they were going to come back, we would have to kind of re-promote it all over again as a whole new brand, basically. And then in that time, Midori came out with some new stuff. We were able to carry our own Goulet notebooks, you know, and they were just, Leuchtturm really kind of took off, and we just had a lot of other kind of good notebook alternatives, and just wasn't as much of a hole to fill in terms of the Midori refills and stuff like that. So I at the time, it wasn't that long ago, at the time they were like, okay, we're going to start ramping back up a little bit. We were like, well, I don't know, we might have to hold off on this. You know, just there wasn't a lot of brand recognition, wasn't a whole lot of demand, wasn't as much of a hole to fill in the marketplace for that type of notebook. So they're kind of on ice right now for us, you know. So it's something that we're open to possibly in the future, but it hasn't, you're kind of like the first person that's asked me about it in a long time. You know, it's just things like that can happen. Supply dries up, designs change, demand shifts, and we just have to make, you know, sound business decisions as to what we feel makes the most sense. And sometimes I completely understand it can be really confusing as a customer why certain things disappear, because it's like we'll have other people, you know, you'll look at a site and we'll not have something but somebody else will. And, you know, it's different retailers have different stock levels. It takes a different amount of time to clear stuff. And so it can be kind of confusing as to why we don't have something or why we used to but don't anymore. And honestly, like sometimes when we are discontinuing something, we do it kind of quietly because we don't want to make a big stink about it, especially if we don't really have a lot, or if something is discontinued and we're not, you know, half the time what happens when a product is discontinued or changed or runs out of stock or something like that, we don't get any notice of it. It's when we go to reorder, our stock level gets really low, we go to reorder, and then they say, oh yeah, okay, well this is out now, and actually we're told from the manufacturer that they're not going to make this anymore. And it's like, okay, well we have like 2 left. So it just kind of goes on, it sells out, and it's like, okay, well that's gone now. If it's a big deal and it's really going to be missed, we might put a blog post out about it or something like that, saying like, hey, this is gone now. But half the time it's like a color of a pen that hasn't really been popular anyway, and it just, you know, it kind of quietly just goes away. So you'll then like stumble upon a blog post, or I'll have a Q&A where I mentioned it, you know, a year ago, and you'll stumble upon it and you'll be like, whatever happened to this? And that's usually what happens, is demand just kind of wanes and all that. As to Pelikan pens that you're talking about here, the Pelikan stuff is really like elusive to me. So like we've done really hit or miss with Pelikan pens in the past. We get asked about them a lot. You know, the Souvron series, M200s on up through the thousands, we get asked about them a lot. And we've special ordered them at times in the past. We're not currently taking special orders for Pelikan pens now, partly because it's probably like a 30-to-1 ratio for inquiries we get versus people that actually want to special order them, because the price for a lot of them. But also it has to do with availability. Like we've gone to special order stuff. There's a huge number of SKUs with Pelikan, because there's all these different sizes that are very hard to distinguish from each other unless you're really into the Pelikan stuff. So unless we're like really fully carrying it regularly, it's hard to kind of really promote and distinguish all the different sizes. But there's all these different colors and finishes, and then nib sizes too. So there's a huge number of SKUs for Pelikan. So to try to stock it is really difficult. And when we have gone to special order in the past, it's really hit or miss as to whether we can get something. And we've taken special orders before, and like 4 to 6 months goes down the road, and it's like, look, this hasn't come in yet. We're gonna have to cancel this order because we don't want to hang on to your money for forever and just have this hanging out and forever. You know, it creates a kind of a logistical thing. So we don't really do that anymore. Yeah, it's really elusive, and especially with a brand like that the pens are pretty good price range, really get up there pretty good, especially the 800s and the 1000s. That then it's like, okay, color, nib size, all that kind of stuff. How in the world do we know what's really going to sell well? And then when you get spotty stock and stuff like that, it can get kind of challenging. So we haven't really nailed down how to carry Pelikan yet, personally. So it's something that I would love to figure out, but it's just something that, one thing that we have had good success with recently, at Goulet at least, is you know, limited editions, special editions, that kind of thing. Because there's usually like one big shipment of that comes in, it's pretty well defined, we can place our order, get it in, and then it kind of goes, and we don't have to worry about reordering and stuff. But you know, I think it's just in the global marketplace, I think the US is not really like the big growth future part of the world in terms of fountain pens. That may shock you, but I think Asia is a much more growing market for these global brands like Lamy and Pelikan and some of these. Asia presents much more of an opportunity. So I think just in general, globally probably, and I'm very much generalizing here, so take all of this with a grain of salt, but I believe that more of the focus of new stock and things like that ends up going towards the higher growth areas, and then sometimes we get kind of the leftovers and stuff like that. So it can be some a little hit or miss, because, you know, there's only, you know, a brand, especially if it's a brand that's growing a pretty significant amount, you know, it takes a while to increase production, and you have to literally like add on to your factory and increase machines and stuff like that. So sometimes there's only a certain number of pens that can be made in a given year. And I know that was an issue with Pilot with their Kakuno for a while. Now granted, this is an expensive pen, but they did not bring this pen into the US for like 2 years, because they just did not have the production capacity to be able to offer it. Same thing, it was that way with the Pilot Vanishing Point in the extra fine nib. It came out in Japan, and then it was like a while went by, and the stub nibs too, before they were able to offer it in the US, because there just wasn't enough production capacity to be able to do it. So we run into that sometimes a little bit with Pelikan, specifically, is I think that you know, sometimes the stock just isn't there reliably, and for us trying to get into it without having reliable stock, it's really like spinning your wheels in the mud sometimes as a retailer to try to do that. So